good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for what should be hopefully an interesting panel discussion regarding the key things to consider to ensure a successful implementation of SAP Process Control and help to avoid those all too common implementation pitfalls. We've allocated sort of 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the session today for you to answer any questions that you may have or experiences that you want to share on the topic. So please feel free to post those throughout the session itself, and you can use the Q&A function for that purpose, and we'll pick those up and address as many of them as we can at the end. So before we launch straight into the discussion itself, we'll begin by some very brief introduction. So my name is Mark Jackson. I'm the RM practice lead for Turnkey UK. So a big focus for us is helping clients manage their business risks and associated controls. And SAP Process Control implementations have been and continue to be a significant part of our enabling technology-related services. I'm delighted to be joined today by Marie, Louise, and Paul from SAP, who will be sharing their valuable insights on today's topic of discussion. So I'll hand over to them both for a quick introduction. Shall we start with you, Marie-Louise?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Marie-Louise Wagner-Kirchner, the longest name at SAP, supposedly, at least one of them. So I usually go by Marie. And I'm the chief product owner of the GRC solutions, the 5 of them, not all of them, we have more, just 5 of them. Back in time, I was like in consulting, did a bunch of implementations, did a lot of trusted advisory services. And I brought with me Paul and
yeah. Now working as the product management expert for GSC and have been working as a consultant, especially for process control and risk management since 15 years, and also focused and specialized there on the automation part, especially CCM controls, or also the menu control performance section.
Great. Well, welcome, Marie and Paul. Great to have you with us today.
Thanks for having us, Mark.
No problem. So in terms of what we'll cover, so SAP Process Control is a great solution, as most people know, for formalizing your internal control framework and providing that greater visibility and transparency over the operating effectiveness of those controls, and ultimately to understand whether your controls are helping you manage internal or external regulatory requirements as intended. However, if it's not implemented properly, these business benefits can be very quickly eroded. So you really need to get it right first time, as you don't often get second chances once an application has a tarnished reputation, let's say, with end users. As they say, first impressions count. So we hope this discussion today can help you achieve a positive implementation experience yourself that will then secure its future in managing internal controls within your own organization. That's hopefully the objective of today. The way that we're going to approach the session is very through a kind of a topical, going through the different phases, the typical phases of an implementation project. So we're discussing some of the common pitfalls and that you need to be wary of, and things that you need to try and get right. Some really key things to focus on across those different phases, right from the drafting of those business benefits and the business case associated with the project to start with, right the way through to transition to support and handing it over and that business as usual activities. So we'll cover the full sort of life cycle of the project, and hopefully you'll pick up some good tips across those different phases. So we'll start off then from the very first elements, and that is around building the business case. It's obviously an important prerequisite for any SAP Process Control implementation. Without it, there's may not even be an implementation in the first place. So it's important to get this right. Also set expectations and clarify its role, its place within the organization. So a lot of stuff to talk about, I think, on this area in particular. So if I can come to you perhaps first, Marie, to get to what would your advice be to the attendees around the business case phase of a project?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is process control is a really powerful tool, a powerful solution. So yeah, sometimes you're tempted to go with all the whistle and bells, but this is what I wouldn't do. I would really start small, yeah, and maybe even start with a POC and then expand the scope and really focus on like little areas, focus on the success, focus on the change management, everything that goes with it, to ensure that at the end of the day, you really have a good solution approach. Yeah, and we offer a lot, sometimes way too much, I feel. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Paul,
then then there's important that also, or is it start small, also to manage the expectation of the business users, which come to it, so that they really have the understanding when you come to the business case. Say, okay, why are you doing this, and what they expect as an end result, especially when you're talking about then implementing, for example, CCM controls. And sometimes they do calculations on what if it's a goal, what to achieve. It would be a number of CCM controls. But also here, I would say the best CCM control, what we have built with the best return on invest, was the ones we've never built, because when we do the walkthrough with the business together, we found out that there's an issue in the process, and it was much easier to fix the issue in the process itself. And so we didn't need to build a CCM control. Just like this is also a different view, not only say, okay, use all the functionality and all the things, but also focus on the basics when you go on the process level.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think when it comes to a good solid business case, well, it obviously always helps in terms of selling the solution and the business need. If you can have some form of return on investment, that's always very helpful. Obviously, it's difficult sometimes when you're dealing with something like process controls, and it's all about assurance and managing risk and stopping bad things from happening, to quantify some of those things. But certainly depending on the scope of what you're doing, if you're, and what you're hopefully trying to replace through some further automation. So for example, if it's an organization which is relatively mature in the processes that they conduct around internal controls assurance, so they perform a lot of management testing, perhaps in the first line of defense, or there's a lot of testing being performed in the second line also. But at the point in time they're doing a lot of those things manually, then let's quantify how much time is that taking. What is the effort that's expended by those individuals that are performing that testing, using those sort of manual methods. And by driving some of those control evaluation activities through process controls, how are they helping to automate that? How are they streamlining things? What's the time savings and therefore some of the cost savings there? So I think that's quite a key thing. If you can demonstrate some tangible benefits, and that means by looking at figures and cost savings and those return on investments, I think that always helps a lot. Not always possible to do, and it does depend a bit on the what the organization that is implementing the solution is doing at the present, because sometimes an organization is using it to help on their maturity, help increase their maturity, and they may not be doing a lot of assurance activities because of the fact they don't want to do it in a manual way. So it's not as though you're replacing activities that are already taking place, you're actually introducing new ones, but obviously for the benefit and to improve that sort of assurance over your control environment generally. But I find that that's always quite a helpful thing to do.
Yeah, and while you mention organization, I think we should not neglect that, of course, you need really support from the leadership teams. Yeah. The fish starts to stink from the head. I mean, that is not only a saying from Hamburg, that's a general saying. So with that, you also need the support. Yeah, they need to be behind you. Best is if you have some key performance indicators that support you. Yeah, and of course, support your journey of implementation, because it's going to be kind of a way, even though it goes fast, but it requires also, and together with the leadership support, you really need strong change management. People don't like change. I mean, we're all humans, right? Don't take my cheese, you may know that. Yeah, so, and with that, of course, we like to do the way we did it, and it's not always the smartest way. So we also have to look into like, where can we improve our business process? Not like change the solution, yeah, like completely, but rather like when you work out on the business case and scope, and Mark, as you said, like the business benefits, but also like, where is there room for improvement? How can we do it? Where do we need to change? Rather than just looking in how we can change the world or the GRC solutions.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's also important to be aware of what else is going on within the organization and how the technology implementation is supporting that. For example, if organizations are doing work around internal controls transformation. So looking at the content, have they got the control frameworks in place, the content that will then feed into a solution like SAP Process Control, calling that out and saying how this helps take that then to the next level and increasing them along that maturity curve. So being aware of the other related initiatives in the organization and tying that into the process control implementation is always, I find, helpful as well.
Yeah, they're never the only ones, right? It's not
Absolutely.
the only project in a huge organization. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also increasing the maturity level. It's also then when calculating the business case, where I said it's not also just focusing on how much more effort we can save on this, because it's also to get an improvement of your data quality itself, where you have to focus and use this as a base for calculation when it comes to outputs and control performance on all these things. So it's not everything what you can just calculate based on numbers. There's even more what can be achieved and which should be also focused on when you think of the implementation and setting up the projects.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's business case. So we'll now move on to project initiation. So here we're looking at planning and preparation, determining how you're going to approach the implementation. So identifying the sort of the key stakeholders, etc. So who wants to kick off on this one?
Yeah, I can go first if you don't mind. So I think what is always important is like when you really initiate the project that you look like also like on the details, meaning like what is the control scope that we're dealing with? Because what I figured quite frequently that controls were not designed always like in the best and smartest way. I remember one control for 800 company codes with an expected exceptions of like 60,000 line items per day per company code. So where you don't have like smart design. Yeah, so, and this is where you have to say, okay, yeah, it's not that we cannot technically do that, but is it really adding the value you're looking for? Yeah, so really like while starting small, you always have to ensure that you start smart. Yeah, and potentially really challenge the controls to a certain extent. I mean, there's a lot of best practice content out there, so that wouldn't hurt. And then you need to understand like who owns them, who is involved. Yeah, like the ownership to be able to discuss that. That is like, I think that is really important in the beginning to understand also like the ownership, accountability, and the scope, like the nature of the scope as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, my thoughts on this is that no matter how good the solution is, it will only ever be as good as the content that you put in it. So the master data is key around this, and like you say, making sure that they've got those frameworks in place, that they've been rationalized where possible, they've been reviewed and approved, and there's consistency of the way those internal control frameworks have been put together across the different functions and departments within the organization. Because putting that poor quality data into the system, you're just going to get poor quality reporting and insights as well. The tool is not a silver bullet. It's not going to help you improve the quality of the data. The data is something completely separate and needs work. So I think that's a really important prerequisite, that the content that goes in, making sure that you've got the relevant processes identifies and ready to go, and they're just being facilitated through the tool itself, and those sort of governance roles, around control owners, control testers, those types of governance roles and activities that also need to be identified as well, and see how they're going to fit into the overall solution and the sorts of things that they're going to be called upon to address as part of those workflow driven processes that will be facilitated by the tool. Not to say that all of this stuff has to be done right before you start the design phase, but I think it needs to be at least recognized that this needs to happen either before, some of these before, but at least alongside, so that it's ready to drop at the right time and support your project timelines as well.
And it's also not just only to say, okay, focus on the right controls, on the right content, but also to identify when it comes to the design and then initiation, to also identify the right stakeholders. So said, okay, you need for the controls also the subject matter experts which have the knowledge about specific controls, the specific setups, specific processes. And also when it comes then with talking to them, also to manage expectations. For example, we said if you're talking about semi-automated or automated controls, it does not mean that you don't have to do anything with it. So reviewing the exceptions, it's a must. And they also have to understand that said, okay, it's not an automated control and it's running and nothing is to do anymore. So this is right to get this understanding, expectation management.
Yeah, and why we really want to, like avoid pitfalls, so once in a while people will come and suggest like, let's do a big bang, let's do all at the same time. No, not in my world. Yeah, no one can really cope with it, also cannot manage it. And then we also have a little question in the chat that I think we can pick up here, because the question is, what are some of the control frameworks that we should consider using for the project initiation phase? That depends, that's like kind of a consulting answer, but it really depends. Where do you have to comply with? That is first of all key. Which business process do you want to realize when it comes to your control framework? Yeah, not everything is just SOX related or anything. You have a bunch of internal controls along your processes, because at the end of the day, you have business risk that you need to mitigate with controls. And of course, there's a lot of best practice, available. You have IT application controls, IT general controls, that is also, and also within the process. Yeah, then of course you have the corresponding controls available, like segregation of duties and so on. So that's why I say it really depends, yeah, on how you, what you would like to start with first, what your process that you pick. And we usually recommend that you pick a critical process for you. And critical is, wherever the money flows, yeah, where you potentially have big audit findings, big audit tickets. So common areas, procure to pay, yeah, there's a lot action with one-time vendors, so where you can really make a change, yeah, and contribute to the organization. Hope that answered your question, kind of, yeah.
I'm sure it does.
Was a long answer. I feel free to follow up accordingly. Yeah.
Okay. So if we move on to the solution design phase, then, as we're all very aware, effective design is absolutely crucial in setting that tone, steering and directing the rest of the project. So what are the fundamentals that need to be considered here? Paul, I don't know if you want to kick us off on this one.
Yeah, we're talking about design and also following up on Marie's explanation to which kind of controls to focus. So one thing is also to get the buy-in of the business. I think it's very important, and then it also makes sense to address their pain points, what they currently have on their side. So it might be, when we're talking or looking at quick wins from might be different from either on the technical side. So some of the quick wins, especially when we talk about, for example, automation, like using an existing ABAP report, for example, would but be the smartest thing what you can do as a design, because then you just get the results, but not this management by exception. So it makes sense maybe to rethink and redesign the purpose, what you want to achieve, and go for more smart the ways, like configurable scenarios and HANA views or something like this on this. But also when it comes to the business, what was very good in the past was they came with some small requirements when it comes to specific controls, processes they want to monitor, and then we just set it up, and then we provide them a good experience on this. So they saw the first results. It's also what we saw is that not with the big bang, but with a really small POC, and then they get experience with the tool. They get happy with the results, what they get, and then automatically, after a couple of weeks, after a couple of months, they came from their own, because they see what is the benefit, what the solution provides them, and then they came with a lot of funny ideas, what they want to automate, what they want to see, and I think this is what you have to consider right from the beginning.
Anything your side, Marie? Sorry.
That's okay. I'm used to that. Yeah. So my personal enemy is actually the scope creep. Yeah. So that is like, everyone is trying to, chive in from the sideline and having great ideas. Let's do enhancement here. Let's take this little whistle. Let's take the bell. And I say no. We really stick to a small approach first. And you see, I repeat myself here. Yeah. And on top of that, we have a question in our chat box. What would you suggest to help business with minimal standardization and lots of manual controls? Minimal standardization. I'm a fan of huge standardization, to be honest. Yeah, I think harmonization and standardization are basically keys, and I prefer smart control design that allows to automate, but also because I'm lazy. Yeah. You need to have manual controls, definitely. And also here you have like a smart control design. But also let me give you guys, when I took over back in time a department, there was, SOX was new. I'm that old. Yeah, SOX was new. So, and they had like a bunch of controls, and I really reduced it by almost like 50% when I took over, because you look at it, do you really need it? Does it make sense? Does it add value? And that's why I say, like, look what adds value, what really addresses your risk. That would be my answer. And then make it as smart as possible, like, standardize as good as possible. And of course, like, do it manually as you think you should do it. What is your take on that, Mark?
Yeah, I agree. I think that it goes back to I think that point needs to be addressed as part of the project initiation. We talked about the master data and making sure that the content is to a good level of quality before you even consider putting it into the tool or looking at how it can be applied within the tool. So I think we're going to step back almost with that particular question, and there needs to be some internal program of work there around looking at how you can standardize. You're never going to standardize everything, but I'm sure within certain organizations there is a degree of standardization that can be achieved. And rationalize as well, rationalizing controls. There might be a lot of controls that are being operated which aren't necessarily as important as others, or there's duplication. So there's certainly a focus on rationalizing your controls as well, and obviously wherever possible looking at how you can leverage your ERP systems or solutions, which are where your key business processes are operating, in order to leverage any automation within those solutions themselves first of all. So looking at configurable controls which could potentially replace those manual activities. Once you're in that stage, then you're looking at, right, how can we then apply those controls in process control as part of this design phase? And in terms of looking at the design, I think this is, again, master data for me is, and I keep banging on about it, but it's so crucial, I think, and we've seen customers getting themselves in knots a little bit around this. It's really important for me that you need to, part of this is actually in the design, is understanding the solution and understanding some of the key mechanics of how that master data model works within the solution itself. And that means, the third party that's working with the customer, taking the time to explain it to them and having some discovery sessions with them as part of that design phase. So it's not just straight into, right, here's your hand over your master data, we're going to put it into the tool and just tell us how you want it done. It's about showing them what those structures look like, showing those process hierarchies, those organizational hierarchies, how they interact with each other, how the functionality that you want to implement dictates a little bit about how that either may limit or give you more flexibility on your master data in terms of allowing local changes or not, as the case may be, whether you're using shared service center organizations or not, and what that does to in terms of flexibility around being able to make changes to master data. So I think all those things need to be taken into consideration and have taken the time with the customer to make sure that they understand them clearly, and therefore can make more informed design decisions about how we apply our master data, which hopefully has gone through that standardization and rationalization before, and apply it into the tool itself. So for me, that is always a really key area as part of the design.
And especially also for master data, I think when we're talking about process control and automation and controls and getting compliant, but at the end, in the fact, it's still a reporting tool, because reporting is that what you want to present as the results to your management, to the team members, to the auditors. And this is also, I think, one point where you have to focus on when you're talking about setting up the master data and the design, to really say, okay, is it necessary that I have a huge complexity in my master data with all the company codes reflected? But if at the end, when I just report on regions or on groups, for example, then it does not make sense to reflect everything in the tool. It would be really then we said, okay, let's focus on and have a look what you really want to report on, where you really want the status tracking on what level and how deep you want to go. I think this is one important thing when it comes to this master data.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Paul. And that's one thing we always try and stress is that it's not, those org hierarchies and process are not there to represent your an organization map at all. It's there for the purposes of reporting on internal control. So it should only be as detailed and granular as your internal controls reporting needs to be. So that's the thing that you should keep in mind, because otherwise, like you say, it can get too complicated, too granular, and it becomes a bit unwieldy to manage, and it still doesn't help with your reporting. And at the end of the day, that's the purpose of this solution, is to get better insights and transparency into the effectiveness of your internal controls. So that's absolutely key thing for me as well.
Yeah, aside from sticking to the standard, yeah, that is
Standard
like
as well.
that is also like one of the key aspects. Like really stick to the standard. We have another question, and what are the very first steps towards implementing PC if the landscape just has SAP GRC AC currently? So, and then can the PC implementation be done for technical IT system controls first to start with? Two questions in one. So the first one is you need a license. Sorry, you need to purchase it, but you can have it like on the same stack. Yeah, actually, PC, like process control, risk management, and access control share like one solution stack. And once you have the license, you can activate it, and you can actually also use it there. And you can then even integrate it to have, for example, like SOD mitigating controls, like associated with process controls. So, and can it be done for technical IT system controls first? Absolutely, because they're the quick wins. You can do like 3 automated controls basically in this area in half an hour. You can ask Paul. I did it one morning. Yeah. So because they're like fairly easy, straightforward. They're just looking into tables, throwing out exceptions, so that is not rocket science. You have huge success right in the beginning. Yeah, and then we have here, can you repeat that statement, please? I'm not sure what that is supposed to mean. Maybe kindly you can double check what you meant. Yeah,
if we get some clarification on that question. In the meantime, I think let's progress to the next phase. We spent quite a lot of time on design, but I think that reflects how important I think that phase of the project is. So I think it's right to spend a bit of time on that one. So moving into build. So hopefully at this stage, our customers have created a nice, elegant solution design. And now we're moving into the build phase where we're starting to realize that solution blueprint. So what in your experience, Paul, what are the key things to get right here in order to ensure a productive build phase?
Yeah, from the beginning where I said, focusing on this reporting part, what you want to achieve when it comes to this, and then also be clear when you do walkthroughs on the individual topics. Like, for example, when we talk about controls, and just to stress this automation of the controls, is really that when we start before we start the building of this, is really to do a detailed walkthrough with the stakeholder and subject matter experts to understand really, okay, what are they currently doing, what are the steps they are doing, or if it's a new control totally out of their mind, it's just to understand, okay, what is the data set behind it, what kind of transaction they are currently using, where they expect to see the data, getting from the data, which systems are impacted by these, to really get a whole understanding. But not only focusing to say, okay, where to get the data, but also to clarify then with the business together, also in this building, or before the really building phase, or before you started, to say, okay, what is the expectation or exception handling afterwards? So just once we have generated the control and we have some output of the control, and maybe we found some exceptions, deficiencies, or issues, then the fact is always also to make the business aware what they want to do with the results afterwards. Just to producing results, it's nice, then we have lots of things in the system, but you have to manage it somehow. And that's either it's on the amount of data. If you get this example, what Marie mentioned, 2,000 lines per day, then who should manage it? Or just because the task is in someone's work inbox and he didn't follow up on this, then because he doesn't know what to do with it. So it must be really also from the beginning clear what is the exact exception handling, because then it might have also totally redesign of the overall control, because then they see the results and then they say, okay, well, yeah, what to do with it. And then you start again with the discussion, and then it comes back to say, okay, then we have to fine tune our logic into it. So that's where we set these walkthroughs with the business and really on detailed level and think from the end to end process. I think this is very important when it comes to building up controls.
I think, yeah, on the exception handling side of things, thorough unit testing for me is a really important one, actually, particularly depending on the scope of the project. So if, for example, you're implementing a lot of continuous controls monitoring, so business rules, data sources, etc., and you're doing it across multiple systems rather than just a single one, just testing that business rule, the data source across one of those systems isn't going to cut it. You're going to have to test them in all those systems, because it might just behave slightly differently based on the versions in those target systems as well, and the structures behind those data. Might be just a slight change in what field is holding what data, etc. And you're only going to identify that if you test all of those different sort of variables. So kind of test and test again. You want to weed out all of those issues that are avoidable, rather than identifying them in UAT, which could cause a lot more problems. And that's when obviously the users are getting more involved. So it can sort of present a negative outlook on the solution straight away if there's lots of defects that come up, particularly if they're ones that were avoidable and you could have addressed earlier on in the project. So I think thorough unit testing is certainly an important thing from my perspective.
Mm-hmm. And this is not only for automated controls, but only when you think about manual control performance or test plans and something like this. If the steps are not clear and defined what the recipient should do, then they will do whatever, but not what you expect as an output. So it's working for all these scenarios that you really have to focus on. Okay, what is the design and how to set it up.
Yeah, but aside from that, I think we should not neglect one critical aspect. And I'm sorry to say that, this is like, who's doing the implementation? Yeah, so, you have to have the right implementation team and partner for that. That to me is key. Yeah, just because someone has PC on the resume doesn't mean he knows process control. He might just have a personal computer. Yeah, so we have to be honest. And if you go for cheap, yeah, like really cheap, if you pay for a bike, you cannot expect a Porsche. We also have to be realistic here. So, and I think like when it comes to the right size of the project team, you don't have to throw like hundreds of consultants, to such a project. It's usually really managed by small teams, but with the right expertise. I think that is, to me, is like one of the key success factors. And then of course that you stay in contact with your stakeholders and exchange information, keep them up to date, involved. We also have here one question. I'm working on implementing automated IT controls using gRCPC. Want to know if the new S/4HANA CDS views can be used to create data sources like ABAP report or tables or queries. You can actually use absolutely, you can use HANA, you can use CDS views, to create them as a data source. We do that on a regular basis, especially for like big tables like CDHDR or CD+, where you have like overwhelming data. So, and where you want to have like more data joins than just 5 for configurables. We also have one more when it comes to smart control design. Is there any way to control and orchestrate some AI ML based controls, for example, to see some correlations, causations, link between control failures, auto adjust some thresholds and so on. So currently we don't have like AI ML embedded in this because you develop your controls. Yeah, but of course you're free to enhance them accordingly and add smartness on top. Yeah, that would then be a little bit of programming effort on your side. Yeah, but that is like, smartness is not just only replacing humans with artificial intelligence, but of course it's also like having a general small and lean control design. So and then we have one last one in this context. And do you have good experience of automating controls related to sustainability control framework? Why not? You can automate everything where you have the data available. Yeah, and of course with the integration with risk management, you also have this aspect. like risk and controls being integrated for reporting. Sorry, that was a lot, 3 questions at once. So.
That's great, thank you. So we're going to move on. I'm just wary of time a little bit. We've got just under 10 minutes now, and we've got a couple of phases still to cover. So we're on to the business end of the project now, I guess. This is when the users get unleashed onto the solution as well. They start to see what you've been building and developing, and start to try it out, make sure it's sort of fit for purpose. So it's a crucial stage really in the project. Paul and Marie, so what are your thoughts here? What's the key things to consider?
For me, it's always been like testing and training, to be honest. Yeah, and Paul knows that. I always said, like, let's have, test cases that we can later use as training material that are really step by step, and that like really any dummy user, yeah, and I was always referring back in time to my parents who are not in IT, yeah, would be able to really manage, that they understand what they're supposed to do. And I think like investing here was really beneficial, because the test cases have been used for training over time. You just have to update them in case of upgrades. So, and I think then also like train the trainer approach, but invest in training and education to make the solution successful in the use. What was your take, Mark?
Yeah, no, good advice. Yeah, I'm thinking in terms of looking forward, and in terms of moving into that sort of UAT phase. I think it's really important that you've got those key end user categories outlined in those roles, those kind of personas, and that your training is driven around those personas, so that you make it tailored towards those specific groups of users. So rather than giving them sort of generic training across, it has to be tailored, it has to be specific. So here you have some dedicated control owners, and they're going to be performing tasks and activities that the controller would expect to do on a day-to-day basis within the solution. Similarly with the control testers or system admins, or those that are just perhaps more sort of senior people in the organization that just want to display things and want to get those key insights into the solution and get good visibility into their internal control. So for me, I think that's really key to avoid any confusion and people asking questions about things that they don't normally get involved in, making sure that you know your audience and you've tailored the training accordingly. And
make sure that they pay attention. That is, because if you do it remotely, and we all know that they start doing mails and so on. Yeah, so I recommend to have them at least for one training on site. Sorry, Paul, but I have to say that because we all
on site.
It goes in the same direction, where I said it's really what you have to make them clear also for the testers. It's a good training for them, so that they get experience, they can play around, they get with the data, how the handling is, because later in the productive environment, they cannot just, okay, I have no clue, just play here and there, and then the data is screwed up. And also is also to somehow give them the benefit to say, okay, yeah, it's a kind of training if you are a tester, but also this is a very good chance for you to speak up if something is wrong, because if everything is then moved to the productive environment and already rolled out, then it takes much more effort to get things fixed or changed or something like this. So it's like, okay, speak up or be quiet forever, something like this, to really push them to say, do the testing, because testing is important, but this is the last chance for you, or the best chance to you, for get your feedback back to the project and get it fixed and working as you expect it to be later on.
Okay, right, let's move on, looking at the time as well. But I think that's very useful information there. So our last project phase is all about transition to support, really ensuring that the solution supports day-to-day operational processes as smoothly as possible, as well as sort of keeping your eye on how to expand on the benefits case and leveraging the solution further into wider reaches of the organization, really, so that everyone can start to leverage those benefits. So Paul, what advice would you give to your attendees regarding this final phase?
So general, also this continuous improvement, and when it comes to operation, what comes always best is to have a regular meeting with the end user and stakeholder. So I would call it like a customer connect with your internal lines of businesses, to get a regular feedback once a quarter or a half year at least, to understand and just listen what are the pain points. Because what happens is, you have your huge project, you have implemented all your controls, they're set up, they're scheduled on a regular basis, somewhere, and then for some reason the business is not happy with some things. They have some challenges. They haven't understood everything, and then all the controls are in the work inbox. They are not performed, and that would be the worst case. What can happen? So what you can avoid is regular contact with the individual stakeholders, with the lines of business. Directly talk to them, give them a platform to speak up and give some feedback, because it's also then when it comes to improvement, they have lots of ideas when they work with it. You are not aware of it, even in the central team or as a consulting, as a consultant itself. Anything from your side, Marie?
Yeah, I think in addition to that, you should really look at like lessons learned. What can we do better? And I, prefer to do that really at the end of a milestone phase. That's how, we kind of frame it. I think that is important, and also to like involve people then in the planning going forward, but also, and don't underestimate it, to celebrate a milestone. Yeah, I mean, that is really important, because you have achieved something together, it helps team building. And of course, like if you work hard, you also sometimes have to party hard. I mean, you can bring your own, beer, barbecue, whatever you want, in time of cost saving, but I think it's important to celebrate that together.
I think that touches upon one of
party aspect.
No, I completely agree. You've got to celebrate your successes, haven't you? And I think that touches on one of my points, was around kind of a sort of solution roadshow almost. If you've developed something that's good and it's adding value and to part of the organization when it comes to internal controls and managing those, then take it to other parts of the organization. So have a bit of a roadshow, showcase what you've developed, what you've built, and that starts ideas in terms of how these other parts of the business can start to use that solution themselves. And it's surprising how quickly those ideas can grow. And then you're seeing is that value spreading throughout the organization. It's not contained within one part. So I think that's a key thing. Other thing about being realistic about support going forward is always that question about internal capability versus external support. I think you just need to start thinking about those things early on, in terms of, are you going to invest time in either recruiting skills within the organization that can manage the solution going forward, or upskilling existing people within teams, or bringing external support in. Could be a combination of the two, but make sure you're realistic, I think, about how that solution is going to be managed going forward, because what you don't want to do, there'd be a huge gap there, and then things start falling over pretty quickly from an operational perspective, and that's when the solution starts to gather dust on the shelf, and we don't want that to happen, and those benefits that you started to realize become again eroded quite quickly. Okay, I don't know if there's any further questions that have come in at all, Marie. I know you've been keeping an eye on them.
Oh, now they're coming more, but one question is, do you have experience to link data sources from other sources than SAP in the automation? Mark, that should be a question for you, because I'm an SAP person. Of course, our customers have experience with that, but maybe you want to share.
Sorry, what was the question again, Marie?
Like taking data sources from other systems than SAP. I'm a little bit biased here.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there are solutions out there to help with that, is integration, those connectors into other solutions. So there's certain options out there. Obviously, feel free to get in contact if you want to discuss some of those options, but there's definitely options to tap into the data outside of SAP systems.
Exactly. Yeah. And then we have a question. Do you have any ideas how one can put a successful business case together for a go live party? Maybe a roadmap towards it. Well, that's an easy one. Just invite people over and party. So easy. I even did that at my home. So okay, then we have are there any plans to build a cloud solution for BC, like we have IAG for access control governance functionality in the cloud? No, it's not like IAG replaces access control. I think that is potential misunderstanding. Yeah, so IAG is an independent tool for cloud solutions that also serves as a bridge. Yeah, in the public cloud, there's also a solution called financial compliance management that is in an early development phase, that will be able to also support public cloud solutions going forward. Yeah, but for looking at what we have right now, complex, huge environments, then I think you're better off with process control and access control, actually. Still, there are also cloud solutions, just so you know, private cloud solutions, but private cloud is also a cloud. That was the last question we had here so far. So we're on top of time, right?
Fantastic. That's a good it's good juncture there, because we are out of time, as you say. So I'm glad that it's generated a lot of questions. It's obviously an interesting topic for a lot of people. So that's fantastic that we've got that interaction as well. You'll be able, in terms of the webinar going forward, you'll be able to access the webinar on demand shortly via our website. So those of you who want to watch through some of these points again, or there's colleagues that have missed it and want to watch it retrospectively, then that will be made available. So keep an eye out for that. I'm sure there'll be some email shots that go out around that. And obviously, if you'd like to discuss any of the content covered today, then please feel free to reach out, don't hesitate, and we'll do our best to answer any questions or queries that you've got, or pass you on to our SAP colleagues as well. But we'll have to close it down now. So thanks so much again, both Marie and Paul, for your valuable contributions to discussions. That was fantastic. So thank you very much for joining us today.
And thanks for having us. We have 2 more questions. I think we will then type in the answers afterward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that. And also thank you, obviously, to the attendees for joining us today. We hope that you found it very useful, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks everyone. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.